It was hard. I have to say it was exacting, it was emotional. I shed many a tear reading some of the statements, and I think they're powerful works. There could just as easily be a second show. It was really hard to sort of bring it down to 36 number, the 36 number that was requested. I hadn't realised initially I was going to be the only juror, because when I've been a judge before, I've worked on a panel, so it was a lot of responsibility. And I guess in the long run, I found it easier because it's my vision. People might disagree with it, but it's my perception of what a theme interpretation, and it's the works that emotionally appealed to me. The standard of work was very high, and what has been good for me is to see the show hung. That was a bonus, and I'm more than pleased with every single work. I can honestly say that. I mean, obviously I didn't know the artists because it's all done anonymously and I didn't know where they came from. But I'm glad to see that more international portrayal. The balance was about right as well. I can't remember what percentage were non-American, but proportionately it's worked out that we've got a good representation of what was put in. Whether that was subject matter or whether it was the fact that it was a European judge, I don't know. I think in terms of textile art, this is probably quite an unusual show, because we tend to consider textiles more in a comfort, beautiful, interesting perspective. You get texture, obviously, more than you would in a painting, because the whole thing about quilts is the layering process, which means that you automatically get texture either through stitch or you get surface embellishment. And I think not only can you get layering literally with your materials, but I think there's layers of meaning, which the artists seem to have been very keen to actually add to their works, and that's what makes them very appealing for me, that I can look at something visually and react to it, but then I'm drawn in and I can find a whole different story going on somehow or other. I just find them fascinating. And I think there's the actual physical contact. You know that that maker has been handling her materials. Textiles are not made quickly. You can't just throw them together. There's time, there's process, and maybe just a little bit of the maker, well, in this case, a lot of the maker is actually in that textile. I have a gut reaction to textiles. They generate an emotional response in me that not a lot of other work does. I mean, I can appreciate the aesthetics of paintings and sculpture. We could talk about scale. I think this exhibition is interesting in terms of scale. And as a judge, I was very much aware of scale. Whether we like it or not, big work has impact. It has visual impact. So you get that wow factor before you're drawn into the work. And that's not to say that I decry small work, because as you will see from the exhibition, I've selected some works that are very small, but they're very intense. But I do think that artists maybe need to consider what impact they want to make with their work and consider scale as part of that discussion. It's not about being, I know on the one hand it is about the practicality of parcelling up work to send it off on exhibition and so on and so forth, but there is definitely a contracting of size. I mean, the original art quilts, if we go back to the sort of late 90s, early 80s, when Penny McMorris was writing about art quilts, the ones that she was writing about were big bed-sized pieces which had visual impact. So if you're going to make something small, I think it's still got to have that power. So it's been a journey, I feel, and I've learnt a lot. I've learnt a huge amount from the different works because I've done my own research on one or two of the topics to refresh my mind or to, fill in gaps in my knowledge. And the artists are to be congratulated, obviously, but I think there's a show that gives a global picture of the problems that the world is encountering, and I hope it generates a lot of discussion.